Hello and welcome to the YouTube podcast series of Cities ABC and Open Business Council with Fashion ABC and Dennis Guarda. I'm Hilton Supra, the Vice Chairman of the student group, and I'm looking forward to interviewing Kamales Lardi, who is the founder of Lardi and Partners Consulting. Now, where we interview people who are changing the world, people who are inspiring us with their achievements and creativity and acumen with the use of technology. In previous interviews, Dennis Guarda and I have interviewed over 200 amazing people and achieved more than 13 million views on YouTube. This interview series on Cities ABC is in partnership with our platforms openbusinesscouncil.org and fashionabc.org, all fourth industrial revolution-based platforms utilizing technology that employ the use of truth and trust through blockchain and the deployment of data analytics, AI, and machine learning. So today I'd like to introduce you to Kamales Lardi. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you say you are sitting in Zurich, Switzerland. I'm down here in Lisbon. So since founding Lardi and Partners Consulting in 2012, you've become really a bold strategic thinker in the matters of digital and business transformation. And you've consulted to many large companies across the globe, particularly in Europe, Asia, and Mauritius, in terms of these digital transformation strategies. And you've been awarded, excellence awards in terms of digital business transformation firm of the year back in 2020 by Business Worldwide magazine. You're a fellow and chairperson of the MBA advisory board at Durham University Business School. You got your BSc in Computing and Information Systems from University of Lincolnshire and Humberside. And also you lecture. You're lecturing now in Switzerland at the in terms of blockchain applications in the supply chain management at HWZ Zurich University of Business Administration. And of course, you are also the chair of the Forbes Business Council Women Executives, and a board member of the World Innovation and Change Management Institute. Quite an incredible array of experience and knowledge and commitment to this whole digital transformation. So, Kamales, tell us a little bit about where were you born, where were you from, and where was the beginning of this wonderful journey that you're on?
Firstly, I have to say thank you, Hilton. That was an amazing rerun of my journey. I think, it's probably safe to say that I was born in Malaysia. I grew up in Malaysia. I got into the whole technology space in the mid-90s. To be very honest, without really knowing much about it, it was a growing topic at the time, and I decided to go into computing and information systems. It wasn't like I had a strong background in technology and decided this was the path for me. I actually kind of stumbled into it and realized I had a talent for it. The first degree that I did was computing and information systems, which required hardcore coding. And, back then in the 90s, coding was proper coding. It wasn't coding by plug and play design and things like that. It was COBOL and SQL and those kinds of really hardcore tech elements, including technology, hardware development, and software development, and so on. But I found it quite exciting as an industry and as a space to be in. The creativity that's required to design solutions based on these technology elements, and understanding, problems and breaking them down into kind of minor pieces to be able to solve a problem. I think this analytical thinking, structured thinking, problem solving, computational thinking, all of these things resonated really well for me. Mm-hmm. And the first space that I entered into was in management consulting. And at the time, I wasn't very familiar with the industry, but bringing together kind of this intersection between technology and business, that's where I really found my talent and my space.
So how old were you when you left Malaysia to move to Europe?
After a couple of years of working with Accenture, at the time they were known as Anderson Consulting still, I decided, technology was very exciting, but I needed to have a better understanding for business as a whole. So I came over to the UK to do my MBA, Master's in Business Administration, to get a better kind of basic understanding of business as a whole and bring in my tech capabilities. And that's where, when I moved over to the UK, and then I decided to stay on, I met my partner who is Swiss. We met in Durham University. Mm-hmm. And came over here to Zurich, and I've been here ever since. So that was in 2004.
Brilliant. And of course, at Durham University, you knew Professor Kiran Fernandez.
We met briefly, yes. So I was the chair of the MBA advisory board for about 6 years at Durham University. And the space of technology and development has been accelerated quite a bit with his presence there as well.
And in terms of, I think what's happening, everybody talks about digital transformation. We talk about technology and how effectively we either enslaved by technology or we are empowered by technology as individuals. And then tell me a little bit more about the reason why you came up with the idea of the book that you've just written, which is the human side of digital and business transformation.
So the book was really a culmination of my experience over the past 23 years of working in this space. I have traveled the world consulting companies and helping them develop and implement digital transformation strategies. So working with companies from across different industries. And the one thing that kind of stood out for me over the past 2 decades is the fact that technology was always at the center of these transformation initiatives. But the one element that could make or break the success of any transformation within an organization is the people element. Being able to take people on this journey, being able to understand how people utilize technologies, whether it's external to the company's or customer base, or whether it's internal to the company or your employees, understanding how they utilize technology, how that fits into daily business, and what are the capabilities of those technologies and how people interact and have different touch points to technology. That's the element that can make or break your digital transformation initiative. And having a true understanding for how do we get people to go from A to B with this transformation process? How do we get people to not only buy into what we're trying to implement, but really advocate for it as well? So getting other people within an organization to say, this solution is awesome and we have to be using it, whether you're a customer or an employee. I think this element is oftentimes forgotten within a transformation process. And so this is an observation that I've had, since my very first project in 2000, when I worked for a telecommunications company and we were implementing SAP, right up to now, 23 years later, when we try to implement technology within an organization, it's always underestimated. And that's what triggered me to write the book.
Yeah, it's very interesting in terms of, I've seen quite a lot of technology developments over the years in various corporate environments and banking environments and asset management environments that I'm in. And when the technologies scoped out, they look at the processes that are required in order to fulfill a job function from a human perspective. And then they build a technology platform that apes or copies exactly what that human process is all about. And inherently we become either replaced by technology or slaves to that technology. Tell us a little bit more of how we can avoid that in terms of looking at the human side, and what frameworks have you put in place to make that that change in the digital transformation process?
There are several elements that, as a business strategist and a technology optimist, I like to call myself that, we need to look at different elements when we implement transformation. And the first thing that needs to be understood is digital transformation is an organization-wide change. It really looks at your organization, the business that you're in, the processes, the people, the solutions you put out in the market, the value you bring to customers, all of these different elements together. And it's a transformation that takes place through a journey. It's not a start and end project. And I think that's the first fundamental shift in mindset that we need to have. It's not about implementing technology and saying, here's a start date, here's an end date, let's implement something. And by the end of that, you're transformed. And I think this is a misconception that many business leaders and companies tend to have. A couple of things that I address in the book. It takes us through the entire I really did try to create a holistic story that, for any business leader, this becomes a guide, a playbook that takes you through step by step, start to end, what you need to do. And it takes you through the entire journey of understanding the key elements. So, for example, leadership transformation. You need to have leadership team members with a new mindset, a new set of skills to lead transformative organizations. You need to also understand how your organization runs today and how it should be running in the future, in the digital future. A key example of that is, since Corona, we've seen quite a lot of companies shift towards this hybrid work environment. But they don't have the processes, the systems, and the key performance indicators and all of those other elements to support a hybrid work environment. So the transformation isn't only in the way we work, but it's in terms of how we build this ecosystem around the way we work. And also looking at the kinds of products and services you can put out there. The opportunities of what you can build today are almost limitless. It depends on your creativity and understanding of how to use technology to create these exponential growth and exponential scale that we want to have within our business. So it's really about understanding, what's this future of business going to look like? It's not how it is today. There's so many things that are going to transform in terms of how an organization runs and how a company does business in the world. And I think understanding these elements are what I try to address in the book as well.
It's very interesting you said in the beginning that this whole digital transformation journey you require the leaders to identify that it's a continuous process. It's not just one size fits all technology that's going to digitally transform one business. But there must be a strong element of education required, because if you look at the top leaders or the leaders of business today, even the leaders of SMEs today, a lot of them in their 60s, 50s, 60s. And their digital journey has been, they've seen the whole, since the 80s, digital world has impacted on them. But still, they haven't been as fortunate as you and possibly me to have actually gone through the process of university of learning about programming and what technology can do. How do we bridge that gap between technology as a friend rather than a foe or a replacement to the processes and people in businesses? Because I think the key thing, the key element here is a lot of people view technology as replacing people.
I'm excited that you asked this question, because this is something that I feel requires a little bit of mindset shift as well. If I can just share an example, when COVID hit at the beginning, I also provide digital mindset training for leadership teams, board members, and C-level executives in terms of how do you lead organizations that are shifting more into the digital economy. And one of the things that happened was a senior leader in an organization who had been in his company for over 30 years, very senior person with lots of experience. He broke down and started to tear up because he did not know and had never had the experience of leading an organization where you didn't have physical touch points with people. This was the culmination of his career. He's always been in an organization where he walks in as the leader, the boss, and has the physical touch points and led the company in a very physical way. All of a sudden, all of these physical elements were taken away, and he was dependent on the digital touch points and did not know how to react in that space. And I think this was the mindset shift that has occurred, where people started to realize there are, the way you lead is one element. The capabilities of leadership teams have to shift towards understanding new capabilities, new technologies, new types of profiles, new types of team members, team structures. And then there's the element of the channels within which, or channels that you utilize to lead an organization. This has expanded now to include, Zoom online channels, physical channels, and so on. So I think the shift of mindset that needs to happen for leadership teams is quite critical. Now, a lot of people have shifted back into this kind of physical environment in recent months. But the element of mindset shift, I find, has remained. So there is a bit more flexibility and acceptance towards new working models as well. And how do we manage these new working models? The one thing that I do touch in the book is new capabilities or essential capabilities for leadership teams within a transformative organization. And this looks at elements around accepting vulnerability, abundance thinking, for example, thinking beyond your current physical limitations, understanding that exponential technologies or emerging technologies create exponential capabilities. You don't have to think within the limits of your current industry. You don't have to think within the limits of your current customer base. The new set of technology solutions offer you an opportunity to expand beyond those. And these essentially break the traditional rules and assumptions of business, and it creates new possibilities and new environments if we're open to exploring those. And I think this is what I find really exciting.
No, that's very interesting. I think the word here is, we talk about digital transformation, and I go back to the one word I used before, which is empowerment. You're empowering the individual to look beyond the linear approach to their business. It's much more of a collective way of thinking. Because, you talked about the physical. The physical was always the general standing in front of the troops and then having a line management system through the physical environment, which drove the process going forward. Whereas now our universe is the digital space. We may be sitting like me here in Southern Europe, you in Northern Europe. I'll give you an example. My team, because we grew through the COVID period, we went from, I think it was like less than 10 people to 35 people over the COVID period. And I still haven't met some of them, my team members who I speak to day in and day out and rely on, and they rely on me to grow and develop the business. And so technology has enabled the business to grow. It's enabled us to communicate. It's enabled us to co-work together on projects.
It's enabled us to cross boundaries that traditionally were put in place for businesses, right? So traditionally, for a business to exist in the market, you needed a physical presence. Traditionally, in order to access your customer base, you needed physical touch points. You needed, to respect the boundaries of an industry, for example. Today you have tech companies entering into financial services, into healthcare, into so many different types of industries without boundaries and limitations. And I find this quite exciting. The thing that probably leadership teams, business leaders will find challenging is now you've got this open, explorative environment and exponential potential. Where do I focus? And organizations typically deal with limited resources, limited investments, limited capabilities. So where do I focus? How do I find the best opportunities? How do I make the most out of these limitations that I have within my business? How do I, as a company, compete with a startup that's coming in with, creative ideas and dynamic ability to shift and pivot whenever something changes in the market? And I think this is what I try to address in the book as well, in terms of giving a clear framework, step-by-step guidance for companies and business leaders to look at the business today, where you are, what you need to be done, what you are doing, and what needs to be done in order to take you to this next stage of business that's going to create sustainable return and value. So it really takes through step by step, the kind of situational analysis, disruptive visioning, building and implementing solutions, and really going into this kind of building a roadmap that takes you from one end to the other. And it helps, and it's kind of a guidebook for business leaders that takes them through that journey.
That's very interesting. I mean, thinking about frameworks, business frameworks, for thinking, we used, expressions like thinking out of the box, sort of standard, but nobody really understands what that means. Some people say, you shouldn't be in the box anyway. As an example. Yeah. So there's all these sort of standard words and lexicons that have been used in business and how business should be run. And then along comes the tools of digital transformation and technology. We've used words like Fourth Industrial Revolution. We've used ideas of Society 5.0, for example. And just for the benefit of our audience, the Fourth Industrial Revolution, as you know, is an extension of the first, second, third, and fourth Industrial Revolution. In each, it's a linear progression of society and economics and socioeconomics. And then along came technology, and we all know what's happened more recently. We've effectively become slaves to technology. Mm-hmm. Whereby even though these large platforms, these what we call Web2 platforms, are very big, very important in our lives, they've enabled certain levels of digital transformation. But because they are free, we effectively become the commodity, and our data is commoditized in that process. And as we move to Web3, which is the next evolution of the internet, and what is called Society 5.0, and the principles of that essentially are where you're now putting the individual at the center, enabled and empowered by technology rather than enslaved to the technology. Have you addressed any of that in your book?
I have addressed that in the final chapter, where I talk about the top disruptive technologies and how they're going to transform our lives and business in general. And so the kind of Web3 Metaverse element is one of the biggest, most transformative pieces. Apart from AI-based systems, blockchain, and so on, I do address these topics. What I find really exciting about Web3 is I think there are positives and negatives to it. Positives being it creates this opportunity for us to take back control, create more, I would say, allow users to take ownership of the data that they have online and to become more capable in those areas, which then opens up opportunities around monetizing this information and data and so on. What I find really interesting, though, is there's a negative element to it, which is people need to have the capabilities to understand what the risks are in that and to be able to use these elements really effectively. And we're not there yet. We don't have the infrastructure and the technology elements required to support this space. It's a growing, developing space, very rapidly growing, but it's still in that kind of development phase. We don't have the regulatory environment and capabilities around that. So there are a lot of things that need to be further developed. And I like to think of it as, it's kind of the wild, wild west at the moment. There's lots of things happening. And if we are not educated and not given the right information, it's going to be fairly challenging. And we're going to see a lot of situations where people find themselves in difficult spots as well. So my view on this is information is democratized today. It's easy to get information and learn and build knowledge. And I encourage everyone to take the opportunity to learn a little bit more about how these technologies are building and what that impact is going to be for people at the end of the day. And this is the exciting space. The metaverse has gotten quite a lot of, I would say, hype over the last couple of months. And the space here, I feel there's an opportunity for us to expand our mindset beyond the physical. And that's what I find most exciting at the moment. Utilizing some of these virtual spaces to understand beyond, to look at things beyond the physical environment. But there's also the negative side of that in terms of, technology being, as you said a couple of times now, becoming the slave to technology. And I think there are some very nice references to this and, videos and images you see online where you really see people in the physical space becoming slaves to technology. I'm not sure how much of this is going to develop in that direction. I think it's still up in the air. There's so much changing at the moment. So for me personally, it's an exciting space. It's an exciting space to watch.
Exactly. I mean, if you think about the massive growth in technology and our use of technology, which was very much driven around social media, and then and therefore that was monetized by the platforms on our behalf. And then you talk about the fact that now we're moving to an environment where we can control our own data, control and monetize to some extent our data. But in that whole process of understanding what's going on, there's a lot of terminology that's being used. We talk about blockchain, we talk about tokens, we talk about non-fungible tokens, we talk about crypto, we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about machine learning, we talk about all these words which an average person is challenged by or fed a narrative, okay, that this is very dangerous, this is speculative, this is it's full of people who, and it's very high profile examples of the boom and bust of the tokenization of anything, just as there was the boom and bust of the internet when you had companies, the internet bubble, whole thing. Yeah. It all happens. So that society tends to, a few people are the pioneers and the early adopters, and then it's all very speculative, and then it crashes, and then it becomes built into the business systems over time, and it does take time. But at the end of the day, what you're finding is people fear technology.
Yeah.
Because of that.
I think the fear comes from, and so this is coming from the human aspect of technology. I think the fear really does stem from two elements. One is fearing a loss of control and not being able to do things the way you're used to doing it, and fearing the unknown, which is really not having enough of an understanding for what it is and what its impact could be. My answer to this is always educate yourself. There's so much information available, and you need to make an effort as an individual to understand the impact of technology. And I can give a great example around crypto and blockchain, which is the space that I built a lot of knowledge on as well. I started off in the space basically saying to myself, I've got lots of clients who want to understand the impact of crypto. And, it was a hype a couple of years ago, 5-6 years ago, where companies were starting to look at this space. Blockchain was very interesting as a technology. And my reaction to that was, the best way to learn is to get into the space and start using it. And the very first thing that I did was to get myself a digital wallet, a couple of hundred francs spent on some Bitcoin, and then started to explore. And you don't need a lot of investment in that space, because obviously digital currency allows you to put in very little money to get a certain percentage of the crypto. But it gave me a good learning for why this technology and why this currency is so different from fiat. And that's what triggered my interest then in terms of blockchain. Okay, what's behind this? Let's start looking at blockchain technology. And as I started to deep dive into that, I realized blockchain technology is actually transformative. There's a lot of hype in financial services, but for supply chain, this could be something really industry changing. And that's how I got into the space of blockchain for supply chain and started to look at, where the crowd started to go into financial services. I went into supply chain. And when most people were looking at luxury goods and things like that, I thought, hey, why not agriculture? Agriculture is very, it needs provenance. It needs to have sustainable processes. It needs to have clarity around where you're sourcing your goods and products and raw materials from. And so I started looking at palm oil, which was something that is a very contentious topic. Yes. And so one of the first barriers I had to face at the time was helping the industry understand what is blockchain blockchain is different from cryptocurrency. There's a vast difference. So that clarity, as well as hand-holding. So the first couple of years working in palm oil, I really had to handhold agencies and government officials, ambassadors, taking them on this learning journey to help them understand what is blockchain, why it's impactful, and what it could do for the industry. And through this journey, I was able to also then help them build we designed and built a blockchain solution for the palm oil industry for the Malaysian government. So this was a very exciting journey. It did take a long time to get us to that point that we had a working built solution. But it was a very valuable process as well. And I'm an experiential learner. I go into topics and implement to learn. So this was, it took about 5 years, I would say, to get to the point where we had a solution built, simply because the level of understanding and knowledge in the industry about blockchain was just not there. And so we needed to first build up the knowledge and then take people on this journey of building the solution.
It's very interesting what you said about supply chains. Supply chains, your experience of working in Malaysia for the palm oil industry, I think is a great example of that. But not many people realize that there are big institutions out there. I think Maersk is an example, one of the largest shipping container businesses in the world, uses an element of that supply chain for using blockchain technologies. And I think what's good here is that the technology is an enabler. It doesn't make the system better because it's blockchain. You have to look at what do we try? What's a problem that we have? And you mentioned something earlier about provenance, which I think is very, very important in the palm oil industry because of its contentious nature and the damage to the environment and the flora and fauna, etc. We all know the orangutan story, etc. And that's very, very important. It gives that trust and truth and transparency to that supply chain process. But in a very simple supply chain, which is naturally disintermediated anyway, this technology works really, very well. And then you mentioned about banking. Banking is a very interesting industry, is that the stakeholders are the intermediaries, and the intermediaries are very reluctant to give up that control, even though that you and I know that, in fact, if they did adopt the elements of this technology, they would know who owns what when, and it can be very, very open. But they don't want that. They don't understand that.
They don't understand it. I'm not sure if they don't want it. I actually gave a presentation to intermediaries of Julius Baer in Zurich. Mm-hmm. So we did a full afternoon training on hybrid clients and how clients have been shifting or transforming to this new kind of digital economy. And they were fascinated. So it was a presentation really looking at the customer journey and how people's behavior has changed and how technology is being utilized in the banking industry and what role intermediaries could have in this space. And I think what stood between them and this understanding was the fear of, there's always, when you talk about blockchain, we always talk about getting rid of intermediaries. But what I tried to communicate to them was the role of intermediaries will shift. Mm-hmm. Because blockchain, again, as you said, it's an enabler. It provides a certain technology solution, but it doesn't transform the entire industry just because it's a technology. There is a shift that has to happen in terms of the processes behind it, in terms of the data management and data accuracy and management of what they have in banking, as well as there are no experts in the banking industry at the moment that can bring this or can implement these new processes and engage with customers on these new processes. So this is an opportunity or a space that could be filled by intermediaries, this kind of shift. And this was exciting for them. And I think when you present this information in a different way and help people understand what their new role could be in this new technology space, that will be motivating for people to make that shift as well. And it was the same thing for implementing blockchain in palm oil. One of the things that I was able to do was visit the plantations, right? And if you look at palm oil as an industry, the technology maturity ranges from having traceability systems for the bigger companies like Wilmar and so on, all the way to having plantations owned by individuals, 10 hectares of palm oil land, where they are still walking the grounds to count the trees that have been harvested. So in between, you have Excel sheets and you have various types of technologies, mobile devices, and so on. So the technology maturity really ranges across the entire industry. So it's not about, okay, now we've got blockchain, we implement that and everything's solved. It's not a silver bullet solution. We had to really look at the current landscape and how do we transform that environment so this technology could be utilized. And this included helping plantation owners understand what is blockchain and why we need to be utilizing it, because they don't care. At the end of the day, they're going to count, write it down on a piece of paper and say, these were the number of trees harvested and hence this much can be sold. So this was a transformation in mindset, I think, that had to happen as well.
No, it's very interesting. And even I remember even a simple use of a 3G mobile phone. With very, very simple apps on it, which was the beginning of the provenance journey of any goods coming out of going into any supply chain. That it's already being used. It's already being used, and they don't. The individuals using it don't really need to know it's blockchain. They just know that they can trust the system to deliver to them their payment for what they're producing. And
that is
that's all I need to know.
That's absolutely right. For the plantation owners, the click was when I was able to describe to them, if we can demonstrate clearly without question that your supply of palm oil fruit or the fruit bunches are coming from a sustainable plantation, a plantation that is qualified as sustainable, you will get a higher price. And that was the clicker.
Really? Yes. So there's an economic incentive. Yes.
They didn't care whether it's blockchain or centralized database or mobile devices or whatever it was. For them, it was, I can prove provenance, and provenance equals slightly higher pricing. And this was the clicker for them. That made sense. And I think this is what I feel is the human side of technology transformation, understanding what motivates people and what would make them advocates for the technology solution that you're implementing.
Yes. I mean, one of the things that you in your career that you've focused on in terms of the communication and development of the ideas and helping business as a consultant is a lot of in the empowerment of women in these processes. What experiences have you had where technology has helped and empowered women in businesses?
It's a really nice question. So I can give you two aspects or two examples. First, not necessarily just women, but more, I feel I'm an advocate for diversity in technology. And diversity is not just about gender. Diversity for me is diversity of thought, background, cultures, experiences, level of education. And when we build a technology solution that can change industries and change our lives, we need to ensure that we have a good mix of people in there, a good mix of thought and experiences that can actually build a solution that's going to be beneficial for a bigger group of people, the masses. This is not true today. We are a long way from that space today, which is also why we end up in situations like FTX and so on, where you don't have a diverse enough group of people questioning why is something being done the way they're being done, right? And I think this is where I'm extremely passionate about diversity. So I can give you an example of blockchain benefiting women in underprivileged countries or underdeveloped countries. In India, there is kind of a social environment where in poorer villages, women who work have to submit or have to provide their paycheck and the money that they earn to their spouse, for example. We've had many situations in that environment where we've seen or observed, this is kind of a social environment. They don't get to keep the money. Many of them do have mobile devices, And by implementing a blockchain digital wallet, they're able to receive their pay and then decide with their own biometrics, decide whether they need to provide that money to their spouse or not. And this empowers a lot of them. So this is one of the solutions that people within my network have built. And it's quite exciting to see that the technology solution can be implemented at that level within society to empower women to create wealth, to generate more independence, financial independence. We've seen many different examples of this with digital identities for refugees, for example, quite a lot of different capabilities also around anti-slavery and things like this. Another good example that I've personally experienced, I mentored a young woman who was basically in the coding space, so in technology development. She's in India as well. During the pandemic, so she's in the space where she's developing and she's still in university, building up her capabilities in that space. And she's within a charity program that pays for her to stay, it's on board within the university and develop her skills there. During the pandemic, she had to return home to her village. And being the only daughter in the village, her parents started to talk about arranging her to get married and not study anymore. And so this was quite dramatic because, she called me up and she's like, I need to get out of here. Otherwise, I'm going to end up getting married. I can't go back to school. And so we were able to organize for her a job within a small tech company in India where she could then go and basically move out and live in this space and start earning a paycheck. And so, this is a simple example, but I think it's transformative for people's lives as well. And the tech, it was a startup company in finance, and this company was able to give her a programming job. Now she's building a career in that space. But it gave her an out where she could actually very quickly go into a paid job and set herself up in the city without having to rely on, her family and so on. So I think for me, this is kind of probably in the tech space, these are not things that are considered very much by organizations. That technology could have such a transformative impact on people, and that we as technology leaders could change people's lives from individuals right up to societies or groups of communities. It's for me, this is inspiring, and my aspiration is to continue being a mentor in that sense.
Mm-hmm. This is very interesting because you talk about diversity and how technology. There's two things about technology. A lot of these technology solutions come out of, as you say, a cluster of development in say Silicon Valley, and then they say, well, this is going to empower the world, and then they want to roll out those technology solutions in India or Indonesia or Africa. And then they realize that it doesn't work because they don't understand the cultural business models and the sort of the socioeconomic aspects of how they function. And therefore the technology doesn't empower it. Somehow it has no relevance within that society.
I think its relevance is one thing, but it's also when you're developing, and this comes back to the diversity topic, when you're developing solutions for a certain group or a certain level of society, the majority of the world does not live in a society that is modern cities with fast internet connection and 5G and all of that. The masses are actually, if you think about Africa, a lot of times these technologies cannot be implemented there, or it's challenging because the rate of development and the rate of innovation that's happening in these developing regions, where people are picking up these opportunities and they are learning it so quickly, they are utilizing the technology and infrastructure that's available in their environment and redesigning these solutions for the people there. It's too competitive, it's too rapid in terms of innovation that these kind of Silicon Valley type companies find it difficult to compete in that environment. So I think this is it creates a certain level of competition where you're almost challenging these traditional Silicon Valley companies to say, you guys, we're going to give you a run for the money. So got to do it differently and do it better. So I think it creates a very positive competition. So the point I wanted to add as well, it's not just about the Silicon Valley companies trying to implement the technology within these environments. They're building a technology or a solution for more developed countries, for a certain part of society, whereas there's a certain large number of people that are living in areas where you don't have infrastructure, you don't have the best internet service or 5G solutions and things like that. And so they're actually taking these technology solutions and redesigning them and developing them with the technology and infrastructure they do have and making it relevant for their own society. So the rate of innovation and the rate of the rapid rate of solution development that we're seeing in regions like India and Africa is incredible. And they're giving these kind of traditional Silicon Valley tech companies a run for their money. And this I find very, very exciting.
Yes, I mean, we've had some experiences ourselves with particularly an African country, where we developed a very, very powerful solution for micro lending, etc. Through the central bank and the cooperative that ran the financing, but we found that there was no suitable payment infrastructure to run on a 3G network, but there was no way that there was no banking information system that could actually add infrastructure to actually implement.
Yeah.
So that was a real challenge. But also talking about diversity, which is very, very important, is and how systems are designed and developed. Artificial intelligence, as you know, requires a significant amount of data and algorithm to actually make sense of that data, which would then train the algorithm to become that agent of help in a technology platform. But the people that design the algorithms tend to be, with all due respect, white and male. I'm being very broad. And when you implement these algorithms and these data sets and things like that, they're not fit for purpose because they have inherent biases in them, and that they can't be implemented in certain countries. What experiences have you had with that?
I've had tons of experiences with things like that. But nothing against white and male, I think.
No, I'd be very careful how I said that.
The element that I think is really important to remember, it's not just about bias, right? Because everyone has bias. And this is a fact of humanity. We all have grown up in certain environments, certain cultures, certain beliefs, values. We all have innate biases. The awareness of what our biases are is very important. And this is where the mindset and transformation needs to come into the tech industry, understanding that if you have a team of homogeneous people, they're not going to be able to see the full picture. And this awareness is not a criticism. It is not something that you have to defend your capabilities against. It's the fact of the matter that you need to have a broader view of building a solution. The second element is it's not just about bias, but it's about being having a blind space or a blindness towards certain elements. If I give you an example, I was recently supporting a pitch for a pitch team for Triumph, and Triumph is obviously a lingerie company for women. The pitch team was 12 white men putting together a pitch for a solution for them. And it was actually quite hilarious to watch, because I was part of this chat group and I could see them sharing data about, look at this campaign and look at this technology solution and this website. And they were trying to make sense of why the problem space was the company was not able to appeal to 40-something-year-old, mid-40s women. It was a brand that was appealing to preteen and teenage girls, and they wanted to reposition themselves. And I'm like, hi, 45-year-old woman here, could give you some input, It's like, the audience. It was a blind spot. They did not realize just looking at market research is not sufficient to build a proper solution for this company. because you needed to have an understanding for the target audience. And in order to do that, you needed people from that target audience giving you their own inputs. And I think this is it's hilarious, but it is a good example of how a lot of technology solutions are being built. Mm-hmm. If you don't know what you don't know, you're not going to be able to build something, for the masses. And I think this is a critical element of addressing the technology space today.
That's very interesting. I hope that the outcome of your intervention was a positive one.
Yeah, it was a very funny experience, I have to say. But it's not a singular experience as well. It's almost something that, every couple of weeks I experience something similar to that. And this is why I say that diversity of thought is very important, to be able to analyze for yourself and say, am I building this for the range of people that I want to access? And if so, do I have an understanding for who they are and what they need? And this, a lot of times, comes with having those types of people in your team.
That's very, very interesting. Kamales, this has been a wonderful journey of an hour speaking to you about the human side of digital business transformation. I thank you very much indeed for all your insights, and I would recommend to everybody watching this to actually get a copy of the book. So where can they get a copy of the book, number one? And number two, how can they get in touch with you if they really want to engage with you?
It has been a pleasure talking to you, Hilton. Really appreciate having me on this channel with you. So my book is available on Amazon, so .com.de, all the Amazons. And it's also available from Wiley, so you can get it on their website. And I am on pretty much, most social media channels. So I'm on Twitter and very active on LinkedIn. Just look up my name and I'm happy to connect and always happy to have a follow-up conversation.
That's very exciting. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much indeed for your time and your insights again. And I look forward to watching this transformation journey that you're going through and what impact you can have to empower your clients going forward. Thank you very much indeed, Kamales.
Thank you as well.
If you're interested in knowing more about citiesabc.com with openbusinesscouncil.org and Fashion ABC, go to our platforms as well, as you can find me on social media and DM me, which is mainly Hilton Supra, on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And do go to the other interviews we have done on YouTube. And don't forget to like and comment. And thank you very much for your time and engaging with this interview on Cities ABC.